Hi everyone. You may have seen my videos before. If not, a little introduction. What you're looking at now is the kitchen that I'm building, and the unit on the left is a dresser that I picked up from a charity shop and renovated, and on the right, on the back wall, is a fitted unit that I built recently, and I'm just finishing it off at the moment. The worktop is solid oak worktop, and I cut that out myself. And then I had to finish it off, and I was torn between oil and varnish. And then I read on a website that it was recommended to use yacht varnish because, well, if it can withstand the sea and protect a boat in the water, then surely it must be good in a kitchen. So I bought Ronseal Yacht Varnish, and I put about 3 coats of varnish onto the worktop, and it was a disaster because, well, it looked awful, it looked kind of gunky, and it didn't bring out the beauty of the wood. But the most important thing was that it didn't harden. And so I must have waited about 2 months for it to harden. And I contacted Ronseal and asked them why wasn't it hardening, and I told them that I'd read that it was good for kitchen worktops, and they said it's not good for kitchen worktops because it's designed to be outdoors, it's designed to be covered in water all the time, and it's designed for boats, and that's why it doesn't harden. It has to stay flexible, a little bit a little bit soft, so that it doesn't crack in under the sun and with all of the water. So it's actually really totally unsuitable for kitchen worktops. So if you do read that it's varnish is good for kitchen work, yacht varnish is good for indoors, it's not good for indoors because it will not harden. I could actually put my thumb into the varnish and there'd be a permanent dint left in it, so it was obviously absolutely no good. So I had to remove the varnish, and that's what's caused the delay in making progress with my kitchen. I waited for ages for it to dry, and then I just put off having to do the awful job of removing the varnish. I tried sanding, of course, that was completely hopeless. It was extremely noisy and very messy, and it would have taken ages, and it wouldn't have been a good solution for getting right up to the edges and around the back of the hob and things like that. So I then tried with a razor blade just a little bit, and I thought, right, that works. I bet if I get one of those scrapers, those carbon, I can't remember what you call them, tungsten scrapers, that's going to be even better. So I bought a tungsten scraper. Admittedly, it wasn't a very expensive one. Maybe the more expensive ones are much better, but it wasn't the solution that I was hoping for. Anyway, you'll see in a second me using the scraper. This is me using the scraper that I bought. The blade must have been a good blade because it cost £5 just for the blade. Maybe somebody can tell me if it's possible to get a better quality scraper and blade, because I didn't find it better than a razor blade on its own, and in fact I preferred using the razor blades. So I gave it a go with the scraper for a while. You can actually go across the grain. It doesn't damage the wood. But I went back to razor blades and bought myself a pack of 100 razor blades because I wanted to make sure I got plenty. And here I am going across the grain. I actually went across the grain, went diagonal, and with the grain, every possible direction. It doesn't damage the wood. I held the razor blade more or less perpendicular to the wood, apart from with a slight kind of what do you call it, gliding. As I'd go forwards, I'd slope the razor blade forwards a little bit and then back, very gentle, perpendicular, and it doesn't damage the wood. It actually smooths it and it evens it out. So I'm really glad that this disaster happened, because it meant that I did go over all of the worktop with razor blades, and I did get a much smoother, flatter worktop in the end. And this flattening, this smoothing off, really brought out, not only did it remove the varnish, but it brought out the beauty of the wood. It really made the grain pop out, and it's that you couldn't see the grain that well when it was covered in the varnish. I'm really going across the grain here, and you would have thought it would chip the wood and damage it, but it doesn't. The longer you go, you can feel it gradually getting smoother and smoother and smoother. It took a long time though, a long time, a few days work. But all the time as I'm making the passes, I can see that it's getting lighter, so I know that it's working. I'd flip the razor blade around after I'd used it for a while, and then it would be sharp again, and I'd just change it really regularly, change them regularly. I had 100. You go right up to the edge with the razor blade. I've really learnt a new skill with this. I never ever thought of stripping things off with just a razor blade before, but now I'm going to do this a lot more with other things. Every time I want to strip something down of paint, varnish, anything, smooth out wood, I'm just going to use a razor blade. I actually didn't cut myself once with the razor blade, but I cut myself 3 times with the scraper. And I didn't damage the wood once either with the razor blade. You see, when you know when you've got rid of all the varnish, because you'll stop getting kind of cobweb strands dangling off, and it was white cobwebs that I was getting off. This was the varnish. And once you're down to just bare wood, it becomes obviously wood coloured and just dust. It's a lot cleaner to use a razor blade than sanding, obviously, and a lot quieter. It's just a lot more work. But I actually started to enjoy it. I didn't like it at first when I was just removing the varnish, but then once I was just down to the wood, it became enjoyable, because then the grain would just pop out as I was going over with my razor blade. You can actually see here the grain is starting to come through, and it was just beautiful. It's like pictures emerging. And I realised what a good thing it was that I'd taken off this varnish. I was so pleased that I'd made the decision to finally give up on the varnish and remove it all. Just using a sanding pad now. It's so smooth and flat. Using a dry paintbrush is very good, very useful for getting dust out of corners. Before oiling, I'm going to be oiling in a second with Osmo oil I did more research, thorough research, and I found out that Osmo oil is the best oil for a kitchen worktop. It does look like there's still some varnish left on, but it isn't. It's just the lighting, the camera. It's not a very good camera. I have just got a better camera. You can just put on a little bit at a time, layer it up, and rub it in. I think that's my daughter. I can't actually hear the video as I'm making this voiceover, but I remember that's my daughter coming in, going up the stairs and doing a little act, pretending to be somebody with a bad back. Probably me. And immediately the grain just pops out. It's lovely. Such a pleasure to put it on. It's so easy. And apparently the people who've put Osmo oil onto their worktops have said online that it's extremely good. Water or beetroot juice or things like that, they just pool, they bead on the worktop, they don't soak into it. And they say all you have to do is once a year clean your worktop and then just put another load of oil on, just so, you know, rub over a bit of oil once a year and that's it. No sanding necessary. I used a brush to go at the back of the hob because I didn't want to get oil onto the hob. You have to just put a little bit on because you have to wipe off the excess anyway, otherwise it would dry sticky. You leave it to dry overnight before putting any more on. I've now put on 2 coats. I'll put more coats on once the kitchen is all finished. Now I've got a really beautiful worktop. I'm really happy with it. Just taking off the excess now. It did dry really well. The next day it was all completely dry. This is just a kitchen sponge and scourer that I used. You don't have to have anything special. And that's it. Job done. It took about 4 months to get there.